Influential or nonsensical? All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Shen Mooooooooooooo.
10 is the magic number.
And Chiptune Heaven.
All this and more coming up on today's show. Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech. Hello everyone, we are joined today by Matt from the YouTube channel TechMadeEasy. And to find that, it's youtube.com/@TechMadeEasy UK. The UK is the important bit. Thank you for joining us, Matt. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. And Dave joining us as usual.
Yes.
Been up to some good retro things this week, but first of all, I want to show you both my clock. I'm going to hold it up to the
Showed
camera.
you what, sorry?
My clock. Here it is. And this appeared unexpectedly in the post from So Retro Soft. Mark over there. Every now and then he just sends me something in the post, and it's just a nice surprise. Let my legs swing in there because I've got I'm sort of river dancing in a clock. Got to tighten
for
that
people
up.
who are listening in audio, Neil is holding a clock, and on the clock is a caricature of Neil, an actually quite complimentary one.
Yeah,
it doesn't put you in a bad light.
Slimming, yes. Yeah.
And I believe the clock hands are your legs.
That's right. Yeah. So my legs spin round. 9:15 is a particularly painful time of day for me. I'm doing the split. Anyway, and on the retro front this week, I think I mentioned an arcade pickup which came attached with some donations last week. I think I mentioned that on the show. And this week I've been sifting through a mountain of boxes and filming it. So that would be one of my next videos, finding some quite interesting and unique things in that mountain. So that's been my week. What have you been up to, Dave?
I have spent some money.
Okay.
You know how I like an Atari ST, Neil?
Yeah, I do know.
Well, I've gone one beyond that, and I bought myself an Atari TT-030.
Oh, okay. And what are you going to do on that you can't do on an ST?
I don't know. It doesn't even work. So I need to fix it first of all, and then I'll have a fiddle around with it. I might try and use it as an ST, because most ST games are fixed to run on the later ones. The TT is what Atari tried to succeed the Atari ST with. The TT is a much more powerful thing. It's a real powerhouse. It was meant for Unix, although they didn't get Unix out for it until 2 years too late. And they eventually discontinued it and kind of changed it into the Falcon. They added in a lot of audio and video processing, but they crippled the processing power of it. So quite an interesting thing. It looks like a Mega STE, but once I get it working, I'll see what it's like. I don't know. Maybe I'll end up selling it on once I've had a fiddle with it and hopefully not lose any money. I don't know.
Satisfy those urges, Dave. See what it's all about. It's no different to me buying an Amiga 2000 when I've got an Amiga 500 or an Amiga 1000. It's just nice to satisfy that urge and see what it's all about. Matt, have you been up to anything retro this week?
I have been breaking and then trying to repair an Amiga 500.
Oh, okay.
So I was doing a video which was basically how many add-on PCBs can you throw at an Amiga? And in the process of doing that, it stopped working. So
you answered the question.
Yeah, one less than what I tried. But no, it's we're getting there. I've been getting some support from a few people in the know that know more about Amigas than I do, which is basically everyone. And we've fixed one problem. We've just got one other problem to fix, and then it'll be back to the video.
And were these Amiga 500 specific add-ons, or are you breaking out sort of the Zorro and adding Amiga 2000 add-ons and things like that?
No, so it's all stuff that is open source on GitHub that you can go and find. Some of them are very basic, like RAM expansions.
Sure.
Some of them are a bit more in-depth. So there's a Lazarus Storm that I'll be throwing in. So that's a little PCB that you throw into the sidecar slot that allows you to add a PyStorm externally. So you don't have to mess around inside the machine. You can just add it on and then take it off willy-nilly.
Yeah.
So.
Willy-nilly. We don't hear that phrase enough on this
willy-nilly,
show,
yeah. Don't believe that, Duncan. I understand you have been You've decided to double down on podcasts. This is your second appearance in 12 hours.
Was he doing the media rounds?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I don't know how it's happened. 15 years of doing YouTube and no podcasts, and then 2 in 1 week. So
You were on Lee More Fun Making It's podcast, which I'm sure will be out by the time this is out.
Yeah, so he threw up a rough cut last night. Because you know what Lee's like, he can't stop until something's finished. And he got that up last night, and I was rather narcissistically watching that this morning before I came and joined you guys. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you, Lee, for warming Matt up for us. Very good of you.
Worked out all the bugs.
Fantastic. Right, should we get into this week's stories?
Yes, we should.
Go.
Fourth Directive has submitted a video from Polygon. It's a public poll asking what the most influential game of all time is. And the news is, well, BAFTA, who commissioned this poll, are idiots, and the public are idiots. So by the end of this section, we're going to have our own list. But to start off with, let's have a look at what they've said. Let's look at what they've done, how they've let us down. So buckle your seats. We might get a bit ranty. Although I promise, cross my heart and hope to die, that we will come back and be sensible and try to be informative. Right, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Top of their poll, the most influential game of all time is Shen Mooooooooooo. Now, I've not played Shen Mooooooooooo. It's an action-adventure game from Sega genius Yu Suzuki. It looks like Virtua Fighter. It was not a commercial success. So they've picked for the most influential game of all time. They've chosen a commercial failure. It gets mixed reviews. It does get praised in 1999 for being the game that pioneered open worlds, which tells me that the people praising it haven't played.
Don't say the U word, Dave. Don't say the U word.
Right, okay. That said, though, just because it's not a commercial success doesn't mean it wasn't influential. And just because it wasn't the first to do something doesn't mean it isn't influential when it does do it. But it is not the most influential game of all time. There were accusations of vote rigging, which would make sense if it's Shenmue winning it. It's got this kind of weird cult Dreamcast following. Now, I think, though, that I'm going to be able to pick 2 games from this list that completely torpedo any credibility that the list has. So before I get to those 2 games, let me list the rest of the BAFTA list, excluding those 2. So the second game on the list is Doom. Then it's Super Mario Brothers, then Half-Life, then Ocarina of Time, then Minecraft, then one we're going to miss out.
Why are we missing one out?
Because I think it's too bad a pick
Right,
that it ruins the whole list. So I'm going to come back to it afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then Super Mario 64, then Half-Life 2, then The Sims, then Tetris, then Tomb Raider, then Pang, then Metal Gear Solid, then World of Warcraft, and we miss another one here, then Final Fantasy VII, Dark Souls, GTA 3, Skyrim, and finally GTA 1.
Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2.
Yes.
Carry on.
Now, it's not terrible because there are loads of good games there, but you can see that it's from people with a limited perspective of games because there are loads and loads of games missing from that. Now, Matt, I don't know what games you play. When I've watched your channel tends to be quite hardware focused. So fill me in on the genres that you like, and are your genres represented here?
There's nothing on that list that I fundamentally disagree with other than Shenmue, which is, as you say, a cult classic, and there is definitely something untoward going on with that list. My gaming history, I was a DOS gamer through the 90s. Spent a lot of time in PS2 and PS3 land, but still, primarily rooted in the history of DOS gaming, even today. I spent an awful lot of time in the 2000s playing a massively multiplayer game called City of Heroes, which you might have heard of, to the point of obsession, really. These days, obviously, life and family takes over. I'm much more of a casual these days, filthy casuals. I sit there with my Xbox Game Pass subscription and dip in and out of things as I can. But yeah, it's a really interesting list, and the mind boggles at that top spot. But there's nothing else on that list that I fundamentally disagree with.
Yeah, I think it's just the things that are missing from it rather than the things that are there. Neil, what do you think? Are your genres there?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking, let's just remind ourselves about the most influential games of all time. And we're missing games that influenced an entire industry. I mean, have you heard of Space Invaders? Or Scramble influencing side-scroll shooters, or Kung Fu Master influencing, side-scrolling brawlers. If you've got Doom, does Wolfenstein 3D not count as an influence behind Doom and therefore more influential? It's tricky because if you're not careful, you slip into just naming firsts rather than influential. So you've got to walk that line.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing, because just because Catacombs 3D or Hovertank was it? Did it first, that doesn't mean they're the most influential.
Yeah. Matt?
Yeah, I think in terms of influential, what we're talking about here is games that have transcended gaming to a degree. They've become more pop culture status. So that's why you're right, there are noticeable exceptions here or omissions from this list. But I think what it comes down to is not just it was popular, or commercially viable, but it transcended gaming, or it inspired new game mechanics, or game technologies, or the future of game development itself. So yeah, I mean, there are some big gaps there. We could talk all day about the history of gaming and how appropriate it would be to name things like Space Invaders, Computer Space, things like that. Of course they're influential, but are they the most influential?
Yeah. Space Invaders probably not a great example to say isn't influential, because it was. But there are other games which came out which did influence people to make games, but may not have influenced the public in what they like to play.
And I agree with you. This list is definitely a specific sample set. There's something odd going on. Shenmue's a funny one. You mentioned yourself, Dave, that you haven't played the game. I have played it, and I suspect a lot of people have played it much later than when it was released through emulation, because the number of Dreamcast owners was not tiny, but smaller compared to other consoles at the time. And then it disappeared, and then I think you waited decades before Shenmue 3 finally came out, didn't we, and concluded the story. So a lot of people are playing it through emulation and then just accepting the narrative that this was an influential game and just dipping in to go, well, why was it influential? Let's have a look at it. Oh, yeah, it's open world. It's big. Without putting in the context of the time and saying, yes, we had, I'm going to say it, Ultima Online, in fact, at that point. Yes, we had open world games before it. Yes, we had NPCs that did their own thing in games. Think about something like Lure of the Temptress, games like that. So all of the things that are cited as being influential did appear in other games. Yes, it comes together in Shenmue, but I think the reason this has done so well is because of what Matt mentioned, that cult-like following of the game, and now people are just parroting what they think should be top of the list based on their age and their influences. It needs a much bigger sample set, I think.
There's lots missing. Strategy, Ultima, flight sims, mobile gaming. There's just so much that isn't there. FIFA. How can you not have FIFA on there? Or Madden, I guess, if you're in the USA. Fighting games or versus games or brawler games. I could go on, but I'm not going to go on. I'm going to launch the salvo of torpedoes, Neil. The 7th most influential game of all time, according to BAFTA, is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2.
Never played it, never heard of it.
Right. It's a game that came out this year, and it's only April. It came out a matter of months ago, and it's one of the most influential games of all time.
Must be a hell of a game.
It is widely loved by people. Lots of good things being said about it. I'm really pleased to read about it. I will play it at some time. It might be a bit too action role-playing game for my taste, but I'm sure I'll play it at some point. But how can you possibly say that a game that came out a couple of months ago has influenced things?
Also, just bringing back what I mentioned earlier, Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2.
Well,
this is a sequel as well, so is it not influenced by its earlier game?
Half-Life Episode 1 and Half-Life Episode 2. And at number 16, it's Baldur's Gate 3. A very recent game. Again, what's it influenced?
Well, it's been influenced by Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2, at least.
I mean, did these two games set up a time machine and go visit Trip Hawkins and Richard Garriott and Todd Howard before, and of hopping onto a plane to go and see Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka and just invent these other games in the past? Of course not. And that should have made BAFTA realise this was a stupid question to ask the public. And when they got the results in, they said, we can't go ahead and publish this. It would be daft to do it. But they did it anyway because I'm sure clickbait sells.
Exactly. Here we are talking about it, Dave. So they have achieved exactly what they wanted to achieve.
You would hope they'd be above that. But anyway, however, all that recency bias aside, there's games missing. So I thought we'd do our own to complete the list. So I'll start, and because I'm selfish, here's my 10. Elite, Dungeon Master, Wizardry, Ultima Underworld, Morrowind, Civilization, Railroad Tycoon, Street Fighter 2, even though I don't like it, R-Type, and Wii Sports.
You love that, do you? You love Wii Sports. I mean, you mentioned you don't like Street Fighter 2, but Wii Sports all
Wii
day.
Sports. Wii Sports was a bit of fun. Surely you played that with people. It's a bit of fun. And that opened the door to gaming for a whole lot of people that turned their nose up at it before.
It was very influential.
Yeah. So I'll give you guys 5 each. I had 10, so you can have 5 each.
Why do we only get 5?
Because I'm selfish. You can have more if you want, Neil.
Right, I've been tapping out while we've been chatting, so I haven't had long to do this list. But I'm going to have to mention ones that I've mentioned: Space Invaders, Kung Fu Master, Populous came up on the show last week, influential. Little Computer People, was that influential or just a first? The Sims was probably more influential.
Yeah, but Little Computer People, it's the first game where you watch something happening and you have a few interactions, but you can watch, which is basically Sims.
Wolfenstein 3D, I think, warrants its place as influential, even though it wasn't the first FPS. And Half-Life, I think that needs to be in there for its storytelling, story-driven FPS. Flight Simulator 1, the Bruce Hartwick one, Sublogic. Ultima 7, can I put that in there? The original Grand Theft Auto, going to put that in there.
No, Grand Theft Auto 2, because we were asking Mike about that this morning.
Just this morning, talking to Mike Daly in Discord, and he said, well, ultimately what people come back to, even in the later games, is stealing cars, smashing cars up, doing crime. There's the same as carried out through the whole series. No matter how technically brilliant and grand it's got, that's what you want to do: steal cars and smash them up. The
whole thing with GTA was it was a sense of fun in doing bad things, but knowing you had your tongue in your cheek the whole time. It wasn't serious. It was just a bit of naughty fun doing things you couldn't do.
And very much like Shen Mooooooooooo, combining it with other things like open world, different genre types, on foot and in car, just combining all of these things. And it was very influential if those individual elements weren't original in themselves. I'll stop there. That's 8, just to mess with you, Dave.
But not Ultimate 8.
Not Ultimate 8.
8, but not Ultimate. Matt?
So I stuck to the remit. I've got 5.
Well done.
I know we've talked about other id titles, but Quake, I think you would have to agree, is one of the first fully 3D games, and influential in that regard. Arguably too soon, because we can all remember how it looked when it first came out and how that compares to more modern titles.
If you had aesthetics, it didn't look very good.
Absolutely. Dizzy, because that's just a personal favourite of mine. Huge fan of all of those games.
I'm going to say that you've got a good point with Dizzy, even though people might not agree, because it is just a game of going around gathering objects and solving little puzzles. It's like a text adventure that you have to work a joystick with, or your keys.
Locks
a bit like
keys.
the Magic, a bit like the Magic Knight series as well.
Gran Turismo.
We need driving games.
Yeah, for its licensing, if nothing else, to be able to get that many manufacturers to sign up to have their cars immortalized in a game.
Neil, why didn't you see Outrun?
Well, I mean, it was influential. There were games that came before it that were of the same genre. I don't know. I mean, it was technically very impressive. There were other. It was influential. I don't know. I don't put it at the top of the pedestal as being the most influential driving game for some reason.
What position?
Well, pole position came before it. Yeah, you could consider that influential as the sort of sprite scaling style driving game. You could go back to Night Driver, couldn't you?
We don't have any driving games in here, do we?
Hmm.
No.
Ridge Racer.
Well, we've got Gran Turismo in there now.
Yeah, our list is better.
Yeah, our list is better. Sorry, Matt.
That's all right. Worms.
Worms.
Because I put it in there just to hear you say worms, if I'm honest. No, it's seminal, right? I mean, it's timeless. I still play Worms with my daughter, you know. It's a huge amount of fun. And lastly, The Seventh Guest, because I know in modern times FMV games have not aged well, but the technology in play there to have a combination of gameplay and full motion video and to really popularize the genre of horror games.
You're coming from a horror perspective, because I was looking at that thinking, well, you're a brave man to put that there instead of Myst. But if you're thinking from the horror perspective, then yeah, it makes sense as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Or Lemmings. Where's Lemmings?
Well, yes. Yeah.
Hello, Mike. We said we'd say something nasty about Mike, and we haven't done.
You can't say anything nasty about Mike.
No, I like Mike. So making this list properly would be incredibly difficult. If we tried to boil this down to the 20 most influential, we would have a real struggle. And I think a public vote, if it was done, would have to go through a panel where games were grouped together and eliminated, so you didn't have Doom, Quake, Duke 3D, Half-Life 1 and 2 in there. Also a question to ask is what does influential mean? Does it mean you can trace a strong route back to it because we're going to end up at Space War and Adventure? Or does it mean the first time it really exploded like Doom did or like Wolfenstein did, but not like the games that came before, the 3D games that came before them? So influentials is up for judgment, but I think we can say this list is not the most influential games of all time. It hasn't succeeded in its objective, but it's a bit of fun, it's a bit of enjoyment, and hopefully you've enjoyed hearing us ranting a little bit. We are sponsored this week by Pixel Addict magazine. Pixel Addict issue 28 is imminent. We don't know what's in it yet, but it's imminent. Any day now. Maybe by the time this broadcast, it'll be out. In fact, maybe Duncan could even slip something in about issue 28 if he's editing this later in the week.
Does Duncan edit Pixel Addict? Is there anything Duncan doesn't do?
Duncan doesn't come on this show.
That's true.
Yeah. Unless you do his accent, and more on that later on. Pixel Addict magazine is a physical, hold it in your hand magazine you can get delivered to your house in an envelope. It is Britain's favourite classic computing magazine. I'd say it's the world's favourite. It covers all sorts of things, not just games, but all sorts of other things. There's always something in it you're surprised you've forgotten about.
There's a binder, Dave. There's a binder. You can buy your magazine.
Put it in
a binder.
Now,
put it on your shelf.
If you want to buy it, Matt, where would you go?
You would go to pixel.addict.media.
Well done.
And the website is working this week.
Yeah, the website, it turns out, was being upgraded because as we were talking last time, I asked the editor of it. I said, it's not working right. What's on? He said, we're doing an upgrade just now. It works in Pakistan. Because the DNS was spreading itself out again because they were switching to a more competent server, a faster server for
Pixel Addict
purchases.
Back by popular demand.
I think it was out for about 10 minutes, that 10-minute window we needed it for. So anyway, thank you very much for sponsoring us, Pixel Addict magazine.
Story was submitted by two people, Squelch411 and Pajako-Z80. And it's an article titled, Retro Gamers Like to Revisit the Games They Played When They Were 10 Years Old. Written by IFLScience.com's Dr. Russell Mowell. He opens by setting the scene, just a scene, Dave, for retro gaming and the nostalgia hit we so love, before acknowledging that it was so popular now that retro game is effectively a part of gaming, a part of the gaming industry, and remasters are par for the course, Dave.
The new Switch 2, which we're not talking about.
That was launched last week, wasn't it?
I've heard it said that it's going to come with a virtual mouse just for playing retro games. So that's them incorporating retro games into modern stuff.
Well, the Switch does come into this story, but that that is a good move on Nintendo's part because they are such a historic company. They have, such franchises. Then make the most of it. Yeah. So Dr. Russell asks, what's the science behind the nostalgia? What's the science behind, in particular, that headline, wanting to revisit the games we played when we were 10 years old? And what's really fueling the demand for retro gaming? Well, researchers from Oxford University and Syracuse, that's a private university in New York. I think that's how you say it, Syracuse.
I think it's not.
It probably isn't. They've teamed up to analyze over 12,000 hours of retro gaming data. So just analyzing me playing Silent Service 3 then on Steam, I think. Now it's 660 players on the Nintendo Switch. So the Switch comes into this. Yes. So they've logged the hours of retro games played from an audience who were on average 31.2 years old, 51% male, 43% female, 6% non-binary or other. So it's a spread of gamers. The peer-reviewed results showed that those who spent at least 10% of their playtime in retro games tended to be older, male, and in full-time employment. I don't think that's a huge surprise. When time is limited, we're nostalgic.
Yes.
So that's what we're trying to do with our time. Time devoted to retro games increased with those aged up to 40 years and then plateaued out after that. And I don't know if that would be the same across platforms or if that's just a reflection of the Nintendo Switch user base. It doesn't go into that. The conclusion was that gamers are most likely to revisit the console they were playing on at 10 years old. And in this study, that meant the N64, the Super Nintendo, those ones being the most popular, followed by the Game Boy Advance. Now, I don't think that's a great surprise. Whatever console you had at 10, or microcomputer in our case, you probably had for a few years. It wasn't just a case of having it at 10 years old. You may have come of age with that system. And just like the music, the movies, the magazines that you enjoyed at that age, you'll be nostalgic for the games and the systems too. That's just part and parcel of growing up. More interestingly, perhaps, though, is the finding that 29% of retro gaming took place on consoles released before the player was born. And they class this as what they call historical nostalgia. The finding, they say, is consistent not just about remembering the past, but imagining a past that never was. And we see this in the cyclical nature of trends. I think, don't we, like in the 90s, the 60s was suddenly cool again. And no doubt for those who actually lived in the 60s, the reimagining of it in the 90s probably seemed skewed. And that seems to be coming around again to a degree. We're seeing the sort of the 60s get kind of popular again at the moment. The kind of Oasis, I know they're not a 60s band, but Oasis was sort of the Britpop of the 90s, which was influenced by the 60s. They're bubbling up again, and things like that are bubbling up. So we've got this doubly skewed 60s view now, the 60s of the 90s of the 60s coming up. God help anyone who was alive in the 60s. Anemoia, or I'm going to spell this, Anemoia.
Anemia.
No, not anemia. Anemoia. Let's go with anemoia. It's a word that was coined recently to describe the feeling of nostalgic longing for a past which one has never lived. And perhaps that comes into play here. And the article also considers that retro gaming, increasing in popularity, may also be a way to rebel against mainstream trends in modern gaming, such as loot boxes and monetization strategies, something that we talk about. So the full paper is available to read. It's very detailed. It's worth a read. And one conclusion in it finds that there is no evidence that tendency towards retro gaming is linked to well-being. So we can't notch that one up, I'm afraid. Retro gaming isn't good for our well-being, or isn't any better for our well-being than normal gaming. Doesn't make us any happier. Dave?
A couple of years ago, Chris covered a story where there was a question: are people into retro gaming as some kind of defense, kind of getting back into their shell, as an indication of, rather than well-being or the opposite of well-being, as a lack of well-being into that? Did it mention? I don't think it mentioned anything of that, did it?
No, it doesn't mention anything like that. So yeah, no, it's not a reflection of.
No, I think it
being
would.
Unwell.
They would have noticed that if it was there, so they would have said, yeah.
It's not a defense mechanism. It's not hiding from something. It makes us feel good, but it doesn't make us feel any better than regular gaming. It's all the same. The sample does feel incomplete, just like the last story we were talking about. It's not a complete sample. It's based solely on the Switch, but it is an interesting insight nevertheless. So start with you, Dave. Did you learn anything from this study?
From the main result of it, not a thing, Neil. I knew this already, but I love reading it. Thank you, Dot. Dot has just attacked the microphone with her tail. There is nothing greater than someone proving just how right you are. There's a quote attributed to both Aristotle and Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, that goes something like, give me a child until he's 7 and I'll give you the man. And we talk about our childhood as our formative years. So that makes sense. It's quite clear that we develop our tastes and we then stick with them. So the games that I played in my first micro, which by chance I got when I was 10 years old, I still like now. And what I could do with them. And I think importantly, what I imagined one day these games would be at that age. And later came true with games like Dungeon Master, Civilization, Captive, Eye the Beholder, Gold Box games, and the game series I will not mention. So all of those games were made of memories that I had at age of 10 thinking forward. I'm very interested, though, in what they've said about nostalgic gaming from people who don't have the actual literal memories of the games they're nostalgic for. This, as they call it, historical nostalgia. And I don't like the term, I don't think.
I don't like the term either, because you don't say you have historical nostalgia for old movies or historical nostalgia for old music.
No.
You're just exploring movies and music. So why is gaming different in that respect?
I'd like to tie back to what I said about me in my teens imagining grand role-playing games, computer games, imagining playing a full Dungeons and Dragons campaign on my computer, taking characters from low levels through several adventures. And also, it did come true, at least nearly in several iterations over the years, through Gold Box games, Infinity Engine games, etc. So maybe younger gamers are playing games feeling, I just want to play the game, this game I'm playing now, but not collect gems, not 100% achievements, not have a gamer tag, not unlock things, not pay for things, not have loot boxes, all those other modern things. They're playing the game saying, I imagine myself playing the game in a purer form without all that, while I was sat at 10 years old saying, I'm imagining myself playing the game that's deeper and more broad and more capable. So I wonder if it's not historical nostalgia, but something similar for me and for them, just imagining playing a game that's in a better way than what you're playing now. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. Well, Matt, go ahead.
I fully agree with this story. And when I was reflecting on it last night, yes, the games I have the most nostalgia for are the ones from when I was about 10. But for me, it's not so much about nostalgia for me personally, but I'm of that age where my child is now of a similar age, and I want to share that experience with them. So looking at the ages they're sort of talking about here, I'm surprised that's not something that they've factored into their analysis, is that the people that they're looking at are now parents themselves and will be looking to impart that gaming history on their children.
Yeah. Yeah, so that opens the door. That shows them the way in, because I wonder myself if the kids who have only played games in the loot box era, how normal or abnormal that seems to them, if it actively puts them off gaming, or if it's so normalized that they don't think about it until they then dip into old games and say, hang on a minute, why isn't this game nagging me to do this, to get jewels, to get my mum's credit card or whatever else? But Matt makes a very good point there. Yeah, it could be that the older generation are ushering them in, saying, well, come in here, have a look at this. This is how it used to be. Try this out. I don't know. But then you've also got the Switch, and as Dave said, the Switch 2, making it very easily accessible now to get into those, certainly Nintendo IPs.
That's a recent thing. That's the big financials behind retro gaming is a recent thing. The company's taking notice of it and putting money in it is a thing, certainly the past 10 years, maybe even since perhaps lockdown, I don't know. Maybe that was the turning point where all of a sudden they've started to notice it and really start to get their back catalogue turned into money.
Good news for gamers, but bad news for ROM sites. And gamers, ultimately. But there we go. Yeah. Anyway, check out the link to this study, because there is the story, but there's also the link to the full study, so you can really get into the nitty-gritty of it. Go and check it out. Links in the show notes, as well as everything else we discussed today.
Housekeeping with Dave.
I'd like to welcome on our new patron, Matt. So thank you very much, Matt, for signing up.
Thanks,
I don't
Matt.
think it's not this Matt. It's different Matt.
Not me.
No. Thank you very much, Matt. If you would like to join Matt and become an official twirler, where might people go, Neil? How could you do it?
Oh, you can go to twirl your way to patreon.com/This Week in Retro.
www is not needed.
That's right. What are we on? Briefs now?
No one in housekeeping.
Housekeeping. Okay, so Charlie Brooker comes up first. Charlie Brooker, the maker of Black Mirror, used to do the TV show Screen Wipe, News Wipe, Games Wipe, all of those things. He had two characters on his shows with sort of talking head, vox pop style opinions. Philomena Kunk, who went on to have her own series, love her, and Barry Pease. You can bleep that out, Duncan.
Or not, because it's his name. It's just part of his name.
Barry Pease from Scunthorpe, who was actually the director of the show. He was called Al Campbell, and still is, funnily enough. Well, Sybil66 submitted a comment on the subreddit to say he noticed how much Duncan appears to be the same man. High praise indeed. Anything to say on the matter, Duncan? Oh, yeah, I just want to say thank you very much, you bunch of slags. Beautiful. Love it. Love the recognition. And carry on. Great job. Lovely bunch of lads. We had a bit of last-minute news when we were recording last week as well, which was that there was a verdict due on the court case in Australia. This was the Billy Mitchell, Carl Jobst, wasn't it?
Yes.
And we were hoping that the court case decision was going to be made when we were recording. Didn't quite happen. I think they were waiting for us to finish, to be honest. So the verdict has now come out. And well, was it a surprise or not, Dave?
It was a surprise. Mitchell won the case. However, I think everyone, including myself, thought this was a case about is Billy Mitchell a cheat or not? And it really wasn't. The judge said something along the lines of you're well renowned as a cheater, something like that. But the case was not about that. It was actually more about internet harassment from that Carl Jobs channel that focuses on YouTube drama. It seems the channel Carl Jobs went too far, made accusations that were either not true or not substantiated, and the judge found against them and has made significant award and Mitchell's costs against him.
Yeah, this from the Guardian's coverage of it. The court awarded Mitchell $300,000. I think that's Australian dollars.
US dollars.
Was that US dollars? Mm-hmm. In damages for non-economic loss, and an additional $50,000 in aggravated damages due to Jobs publishing the video twice, mocking Mitchell's complaint about it and failing to apologize and withdraw the allegations, and his clear malice towards Mitchell. And we're not a drama news channel, so we're not going to comment too much on that drama aspect of things or the malice, which seems to be I wouldn't say popular, but a way of farming views, if not quality subscribers, because that's just not how it works. But it seems to be a thing, and it's been called out here, and he's been fined for it. And yeah, but there are lots and lots of videos about what Jobs said, and no doubt there will be lots of reaction videos right now.
Loads. Loads and loads and loads.
Take your pick if you want to know about it. Yeah.
I think, Neil, you're on the same page as me that you didn't know a great deal about this, other than it was about the alleged cheating, which it wasn't. How do
you take him to court for cheating? You know, what law has he broken by cheating at a game?
I think we thought that Carl Jobs had repeatedly called him a cheat, and Billy Mitchell said, "I'm not a cheat," and that's what the court case was about. Yeah. But it's not.
And the other thing is, Carl also had a GoFundMe, which raised over $200,000, that was Australian dollars, as a legal defense war chest. And ultimately what's happened now is the money people gave him for his cause will now end up in the pockets of the lawyers and Billy himself. So
GoFundMe is a gift to Billy Mitchell.
On that fundraiser originally, Carl said, "These lawsuits are unhinged and it is highly likely that Billy will ultimately lose." Billy didn't lose. So MakerD0 did submit this on the subreddit. Thank you for that. We think we'll draw the line there. We're interested in the cheating. To some degree, we're interested in the cheating. We are to some degree interested in the other things that surround that, but not the speculative drama about it. But we will report on any future legal outcomes and facts when they're laid out. And in this instance, whatever you think of Billy Mitchell, defamation is not the answer. Whatever you think of anyone, defamation is not the answer.
On to briefs now, and the top submission this week was an April Fool's. Nightmare being rebooted, except it's Neil and I photoshopped into the image. It is actually me on there, without the glasses, without most of my beard, and with a massive mop of hair added, which is why it's difficult to recognise me. Neil's more recognisable because it's got your exact beard, I think, and your facial expression. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Local. Oh, nasty.
There's definitely some just for men in that beard. It's a much darker beard than my beard is. But it's a good look. It's a good look. We've had 2 music submissions this week. They're in second and third, actually, on the subreddit this week. A wonderful a cappella of Doom's Gate, a.k.a. Level 1 from Doom. Thanks to Vagaris for submitting that. Next up is Daddy Mulk, performed by a pianist. And Daddy Mulk, of course, caused us to go into fits of laughter a couple of years back, inspired by Banjo Guy Ollie's Grand Theft audio of us doing it. If you're new to the show, well, you can go and watch him slaughter us as well. Links to those covers and Banjo Guy Ollie's song are in the show notes.
SDMat22 has linked a video from Nostalgia Nerd called Before Google, which covers web indexing and search engines from the distant past. And it's quite interesting because it's things you've forgotten about. It's memories that are locked away. And then you look at that and you think, oh, that was right before Google. And it's difficult to remember time before Google, but it was there. And also I noticed his website has been updated to say for Barcaria in Norwich, it says we are temporarily closed, but it doesn't give any more information other than that.
Pajako6502/Z80 submits an article from Android Police. Android Police, is that Robocop? I don't know. Saying the Nokia N-Gage is getting a new game 20 years later, which you can seemingly buy. And I've just got an N-Gage. I found an N-Gage in that pile of things I was talking about this week. So that's great timing. I can buy a game for it.
TAC Redditing links us to a fantastic article from Ars Technica about Salmon Run for the Atari 8-bit, where you play as Sam the Salmon trying to get upriver to your spawning point. Salmon Max, Neil?
There we go. I think we've influenced that for sure. Sammy the Salmon. And finally, Fiskit says OpenLARA, the open source Tomb Raider engine, is being ported to the Amiga. This is the same engine that we saw appear on the 32X some time back. And it's nearly done and playable on an 030, apparently. I mean, nobody expects Tomb Raider to run on a stock Amiga, I don't think. But Tomb Raider continues its attempts with OpenLARA to become the next, will it run Doom? Will it run Tomb Raider?
And the frame rate is decent enough. You need a 1200 with an 030 to get the frame rate, and presumably if you've got an 060 or better, it'll run nice and smoothly, although the PC one's still there for you now. There's loads more on the subreddit. Anytime you fancy a break, go and have a look and see what's there, and submit your own stories to it. A wonderful documentary titled The Chiptune Story, Creating Retro Music 8 Bits at a Time has come out. I recommend that both of you and the listeners watch it. Not just because it starts with a wonderful Scottish accent. It actually starts with composer Kenny McAlpine, and he's there throughout the whole thing. He's really compelling to listen to. Not racing driver Kenny McAlpine, not cricket player Kenny McAlpine, and not Scottish King Kenneth McAlpine, but he died 1,167 years ago. He explains how it all started with Space War and Pong, and then we get all sorts of other people in. It's quite, as you might expect, Commodore 64 heavy, and goes on to the Amiga, as is right to do. He has all sorts of people on, though. Rob Hubbard, Chris Hulsbeck, Ben Dalgleish, Max Hall, Mark Knight, and loads of other people. I think this might be the definitive documentary on it. I did notice a few complaints that there wasn't enough music in it, but you can listen to the music elsewhere. It's not... Yeah, I thought this was great. Really enjoyed it. Watched the whole thing through. It's only got 395 views on YouTube when I watched it, which made me wonder if this is an older documentary that passed me by and has been republished on YouTube. And a bit of Google foo suggests that it was first released in 2018. Even Amiga Bill is in it. Trevor Dickinson's in it. Whatever the case, though, it's not just a puff piece on it. No, this is a proper, thorough documentary. Sorry, let me clarify. The documentary, the doco, is a proper thing. The coverage you're watching or listening to now from me is a puff piece. The thing with 8-bit chiptunes, at least the good ones to me, is that they're timeless. when I listen to a tracker or a mod type tune, a sample based on a game, in the Atari ST, for example, I sometimes feel that sample based stuff lies between the timeless chip tunes and the flawless type stuff we would get from Roland music and full recordings of music in games when CD and later came about. Although, if you go to mod music, or the Amiga, for example, when they really got it worked out, our friend Hoffman, for example, has made loads, for example, when it is timeless, it sounds as good as any other music you could listen to, but there's kind of game music in that hole between the chip tunes and the flawless music.
Don't confuse mod music too much with chiptune music.
I'm
you
not.
can have chiptune samples. Okay, sorry.
No,
sorry,
so
Dave,
you're not. Chip tunes are what I'm saying is chip tunes are the timeless bit, and then you get to sample based music in tracker or mod music, and sometimes that's a bit cheesy and naff sounding.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, but if you listen to the scene stuff, it's absolutely amazing. But if you listen to Commando music or the intro to Gauntlet 2 in the arcade, or Monty and the Run, or Commando, or Hypersports, it's all magical stuff. And of course, Cracktros as well for chiptunes. Now, Neil, before you talk about your chiptune thoughts, answer this question. Is chiptune music objectively good, or is it only subjectively good because we grew up with it?
There was a time when chiptunes grated on my ears, and that was because I'd moved on from the 8-bits and I was being a snob, and the sound of chiptune was old hat to me. And I was like, no, push that aside. I've got a Sound Blaster now. I've got Pooler in my Amiga now. Don't need any of that. And then in time, it became nostalgic, and then I grew to love it, or at least the good examples of it, because there's plenty of bad examples of chiptune music. And the good examples by some of the musicians that you've mentioned there. And I know I wasn't the only one, because then I started to hear chiptunes creep into popular culture, creep back into popular music. One example would be, it came before this, but 15 years ago, there's a track called AO Technology by 50 Cent and Timberlake. Not because it's a good track. That's not why I'm linking this. It's just an example of what I mean. And I'll put a link in the show notes. If you listen to that, from the moment it starts, you'll be thinking C64.
Quick question, though.
Yeah.
Did you listen to that because you're a big 50 Cent fan, or because you're a big Justin Timberlake fan?
Oh, it's Fiddy for me and Fiddy. No, I wasn't a fan of that music at all. I just heard it on the radio one day and thought, hang on a minute. Is that a C64? Which, it would have been a plug-in. It would have been something on a modern digital, DAW that made it sound like that. But such was the way it was creeping back into pop culture at the time. So that's a really good example to listen to. And I also tinkered with making chip music myself. And that's when I grew to really, really appreciate how difficult it is. And to make good music with it, you've got to be a really good specialist musician that knows what you're doing with chiptunes. Those chiptune musicians like Rob Hubbard, they're just on a different level. They really are. And now I love both the great original chiptunes and also the remakes that have been made by people like C64 Audio, Chris Abbott. Rob Hubbard himself is involved in that, and others. So yes, I very much love chiptune music, even if I thought I was above it. It was beneath me in the early to mid 90s. I love it again.
I mean, they do talk in the documentary about how they managed to get more than 3 channels, or what sounded like more than 3 channels out of it. Some of it's a little bit above my head because I don't really understand music, but it's very interesting. Didn't answer the question, though, Neil. Is chip music subjectively good or objectively good?
Good music is good music.
Here we are.
Chip instruments are an instrument. It's what you do with it that counts.
What's your thoughts, Matt?
My experiences with the SID chip in the C64 is quite often I enjoyed the music and the sound effects more than I enjoyed the game themselves. You could just put the loading screen on and go and make a cup of tea and you were still listening to it. So I absolutely get it. And what I think is really interesting is the influence that has had on more modern music. Sometimes in context. I mean, if you think of the Tron sequel that they made, what was it, about 10,
Tron
15
Legacy.
years ago. Not a great film, but that soundtrack was amazing. It was Daft Punk that did the soundtrack.
I used to have that. When I did a lot of running, that is the soundtrack I used to listen to when I did early morning runs and the sun was coming up. It was just epic listening to that.
It is an amazing soundtrack and heavily influenced by those sort of SID tracks that we're talking about. And I think it is subjective, but when it is used properly, it has its place in more modern music.
Just ask Fiddy.
Yeah, it's on YouTube, and apart from there's a couple of minutes with no sound later on, I'm guessing it's a copyright clash.
Okay.
It is there for you to watch and listen. As I said, I'm pretty sure this came out a few years ago and passed me by. And when I look at the people in it, I guess there's people involved in retro tend to get into retro and do a circuit of interviews and so on for a few years and then kind of fade away again. So that the people doing this were kind of doing the rounds in kind of 2017, 2018. So I think that's when it was made, but I'm not sure. It's like link in the show notes, so absolutely fantastic. Can't recommend it enough.
Time now for our community question of the week. And last week we asked you over on our subreddit, reddit.com/r/this week in retro, if you'd like to participate or submit news stories for us to discuss. Our question was, which game didn't come to a particular system that you think was a missed opportunity? So we're talking about ports here. Dave, are we out of contest mode?
We are. The door has slammed shut in contest mode.
Okay, so
it's all wide open.
Top answer
doesn't make sense.
Is from Jeff Mendoza. Always got a strong answer. He says, Outrun on the Mega CD. We had it on the Mega Drive, but it was a bit crap. The Mega CD added a second CPU and some sprite scaling hardware, getting us closer to the hardware in the arcade cabinet. I'm always a bit annoyed that the Mega CD could have been used for some more impressive Mega Drive games, but it was mostly used for fairly crap FMV games. Also, I'm not bringing a dedicated proper Sonic game to the Saturn. Sega in the 90s represents the high watermark in gaming for me, as well as representing a string of poor decisions. It's an interesting one because you got to remember the context of the time. When the Mega CD came out, Outrun was old. You know, I know there was a Mega Drive version of it, but we were always in the moment looking forward with our current gen hardware. But then they brought out the 32X and you got things like a new version of Afterburner on it. So it wasn't beneath them. It wasn't beyond them. I just think people hadn't fully got to grips with what they could do with the Mega CD. And it's in more recent years when you see things like the Doom Resurrection port that uses the CPUs in the Mega CD, the 32X and the Mega Drive all at once, that you see the real power in that. So, so it would have been nice to see. But yeah, the moment has passed, I'm afraid.
Tungsten Orchid says Portal. It was never ported to the Nintendo Virtual Boy.
Pass the sick bucket.
Yeah. Someone makes a point of connecting the red portal. Osprey Shower says connect the red portal to the red portal.
Matt, any answers stand out for you there?
I'm not going to pick my own one, but yeah, DOS games that should have been ported to everything else. I mean, DOS gaming for a while was a backseat, wasn't it? Probably because of cost limitations to the 8-bit and then 16-bit micros. But it's a shame that more games early in the DOS era didn't make it over.
That was submitted by It's Me Thyroid, and the third answer was
It's Metroid.
It's Me Thyroid.
It's Metroid.
No, I'm going with Thyroid. Read Only Memory says, sensible soccer for the Game Boy Advance, a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. I mean, that's quite dramatic, isn't it? I'll read out Matt's. He says, the plethora of FMV games that were cool at the time, to be honest, that didn't appear on the Mega CD. While some games like Mega Race made it over from DOS, there was a missed opportunity to bring over other titles. The Seventh Guest and Under a Killing Moon are my two favorites that come to mind that would have led me to buying a Mega CD at the time if I didn't already have access to a PC. I mean, we got things like Sherlock Holmes, Consulting Detective, and things like that. I'm not sure the Mega CD or Mega Drive had the grunt for the 3D parts of Under a Killing Moon, but Seventh Guest, certainly, even if the FMV might have been a bit, choppy, a bit blocky, but it would have been impressive. Any others stand out for you, Dave?
Civilization 2 on the Amiga. It could have done it, I'm sure. Desi on the Amiga.
It was on the Amiga.
The first Dizzy game.
Oh, the first. Okay.
Yeah.
Had things like
I don't know.
Treasure Island Dizzy.
I always felt the ST and Amiga, the 16-bit ports of Dizzy, didn't feel right.
Anything that was on an 8-bit system felt like a budget game if you played it on a 16-bit system.
Yeah, it just felt wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. So thank you to everyone who's participated. Lots of great answers there, so go and check them out. And that leads us to this week's question of the week. We've talked about the most influential games of all time today. This is a cracking question. It's either going to get lots of answers or no answers. And I'm sure we've asked you before about the most influential game, so let's flip it. What's the least influential game of all time? What game made so little difference to the gaming industry, introduced so little, was so unoriginal that it's noteworthy for that very fact? Do your worst. Or
what game is the least influential despite being such a great game? What was the kind of if we've got an evolutional family tree of games, what game is out in its own branch with nothing coming out of it? Like, I don't know, Katamari Damacy. Is that the end of it? Did we get other ones from there?
Oh, right. We're confusing the question now, but we'll make it very clear on the subreddit in the wording that we use. So
which one are we going with?
Well, are we looking for a game that was very good and then went on to seemingly have no influence? Or are we looking for the most beige game going?
Shall we make a decision and ask the question again?
No, they need to hear how this show is made. This is how
the sausage is made.
Yeah.
See, I want it to be an interesting one, Neil.
I think it should be a surprise. I think people should go to the subreddit and find out
which way Duncan went.
Yeah.
Duncan, you have the power.
There you go, Duncan. It's in your hands.
It's all down to Barry Peas.
Reddit.com/r/this week in retro. Right. Duncan won't be able to bleep that if you're swearing over the top of me.
It's not swearing, it's his name. That's the question of the week. Is it swearing if it's in his name?
Right. Thank you very much again to Matt for joining us. Thank you, Matt. I can't believe it, Matt. I've been on your channel and it seems I'd subscribed to you on my extras channel, but I hadn't subscribed to you with my main channel. So I'm subscribing now. youtube.com/@TechMadeEasy UK. Go and check out all of Matt's wonderful videos, including Doom on an industrial PC. As he mentioned, pushing an Amiga 500 to the max. Power Mac Love, Amstrad, PPC 512s, all of the good stuff. Go and check out his channel and subscribe. Links in the show notes. Thank you for joining us, Matt.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
And we will see you all. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you all next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. He's waving.
I'm waving too, and Matt's waving. We're all waving.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from the Retro Collective and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.